You've reached Hotel Pacifico, your 5-star destination for BC politicos. Press 4 for room service. Press the star key for your hosts Mike McDonald and Kate Hammer.
Welcome back, guests. Hi, Mike. Good to see you, Geoff.
Good to see you, Kate.
I'm here.
Hello, Mike.
I'm here
Mike.
for our YouTube viewers today.
Forgot my
special
sunglasses.
Treat.
Yes,
The
exactly.
Canucks
Bright,
ugly
merry
sweater.
and bright.
What era is that logo? I lose track.
I think 1980s, Jeff, is probably the vibe we're going for today.
Nice. It is a vibe, and I'm here for it because today is a very special episode. It's the Hotel Pacifico holiday party, and everyone's invited, all our listeners, and we're opening up all the festive banquet rooms for the special occasion and bringing in a very special guest with a message from King Charles himself.
King Charles III.
King Charles III himself. Sorry, yes. Cue the trumpets. We are honored today to be joined by Her Honor, the Honourable Janet Austin, Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia. Thank you for joining us to help extend some holiday greetings to our audience.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. You know, as I've said, I thoroughly enjoy the podcast. I look forward to it, and it's a real pleasure for me to join you today. And I am delighted to extend best wishes for the holiday season, however you celebrate it, and also best wishes for success and every possible happiness in the year ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate you listening to the podcast. I think we're just about a year in, and it's been such a pleasure to hear from you and from others, just to hear that, we've become part of, I think, often the Wednesday routine. And I really appreciate that. So just to be a bit reflective, I do want to say on the weekend, I understand you would have been at the memorial for John Horgan.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I was honored to have the opportunity to share a few personal reflections about former Premier John Horgan, and it was a very moving memorial service. People spoke beautifully and I think very honestly about his many contributions, and I feel very privileged to have known him and to have had the opportunity to work with him.
Is there one memory of him that sticks out in your mind that you could share with this audience? You talked about him a bit on Sunday.
Yeah, I did. I really appreciated his sense of humor, and as I said on Sunday, I loved his corny sense of humor and the litany of groan-inducing dad jokes that he showered upon the entire population of British Columbia. I loved his extroversion. I think he's one of the most extroverted people I've ever met. And, he attended many events at Government House. He was always the last to leave. And I used to tease him by giving him my keys and then asking him to close up because I was ready to go to bed. And he always took that with great good humor. But I just generally really appreciated the opportunity to work with him. He was a very honest person, and we had some great conversations. I felt like I built a strong relationship with him, in an LG appropriate way. And we shared many conversations about British Columbia, the future, what needed to be done for our province. And a memory that will always remain for me is how much he cared about the province and about really everybody in it.
So what's happening at Government House over the holidays? Has it been a busy time for you? Are there
it's been
many events taking place?
Yeah, we've had many events and parties so far in December. We'll be closing down for a week or so, but I was very happy to have the press gallery in for a holiday party last Monday. And
it's very hard to get the press gallery to a party.
Well, they were there in full force and they seemed to really enjoy themselves. And I did a little trivia competition for them, which I think was very successful, went over well. But we've also I held a party for Victoria-based arts organizations. Of course, we'd have staff events, and then we will have the Government House levy on New Year's Day, which is a big deal.
Right.
You know, we expect a large crowd for that, maybe 600, 1,000 people come by for that, and the chefs feed everybody, and everyone's welcome.
Can I rewind a bit to the trivia competition with the press gallery? Because I'm curious if you were able to stump that bunch. There's a few human Wikipedia pages in that group. So,
well, we had to, we had
Did Baldry win?
who won?
No,
Can you tell me?
Rob Shaw won.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Wow.
shout out, Rob.
And, I think Baldry was probably holding back a little bit because he and I have done that competition together. This year, Richard Zussman and I did it together. So let me think now. I think some of the vice-regal questions they had difficulty with, one of which was who was the 30th Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia? And they were all puzzled. Until they
What number
realized
are
it was a trick question. It happens to me.
Oh, Mike was onto it. Well done, sir.
Yeah, but some of those questions, and I had a series of questions on in memory of John Horgan, and so that was fun as well because we talked about Horgan Hills, which was the disc golf course that he built behind his home in Langford. And so, yeah, just a variety of things. Most of the political questions, I think they managed pretty well.
I bet.
Yeah.
So, and just for you, I'm curious. So personally, what are you going to be doing for the holidays?
Honestly, taking it easy. I have been incredibly busy this past fall. There's been a lot going on. It's all been really interesting and enjoyable, but just taking a little bit of time off will be great. So I'll be spending it with my husband, my brother and his wife, and our charming and self-confident West Highland White Terrier, Macduff, who is here with me right now. Really just having a few days off.
Can we see Macduff? Is
Can
he
we see
able
Macduff?
to come on to the show?
Will you come up, Macduff? Come say hi. Good boy. Oh.
Now, for our listeners, Macduff has a webpage
Yes.
because his official title is Vice-Regal Canine Consort.
Yes, he is. He's badly in need of we're in the zone
Yes.
there.
So he's
badly in need of a groom.
He's the terrier that Toto is. Is that right?
Yeah, he's a West Highland White.
West Highland,
But
that's
he's,
it. Yes.
Yeah, he has an official job. He's also the official ambassador for St. John Ambulance Therapy Dogs.
Oh,
Oh.
And somewhat to my surprise, he actually passed the test. So he is qualified. There was only one mistake made. It was made by me. But
where does the name Macduff come from?
oh, just a Scottish name for a Scottish dog. That's all. But it really suits him well.
kind of works.
It
yeah.
does suit him.
Yeah.
I quite like it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Your Honor, it was just such a pleasure to have you drop in at the hotel, and I hope we can have you back again for a longer discussion.
I would look forward to that very much indeed. And so I thank the three of you as well for inviting me. And honestly, best wishes to everyone for a wonderful holiday season and a successful and happy new year. Take care.
Thank you very much.
To you.
And to you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, last week we got into the holiday spirit of giving by talking about the Telus student bursary and one of this year's BC-based recipients. The bursary offers $3,000 to $5,000 to students enrolled in a post-secondary institution in Canada, particularly those leading social impact projects in their own communities. Students like Alea Conway, a University of Victoria student who has been awarded a $5,000 bursary recognizing her commitment to advocacy and inclusivity for people living with invisible disabilities. Alea, who knows this issue well through her own experiences and those of her mother living with ADHD, has hopes to raise awareness about invisible disabilities and improve support systems in educational institutions. Another recipient is Cody Terbasket, a 25-year-old UBC Okanagan student from the Lower Similkameen Indian Band. Cody is leading work to preserve and share Indigenous knowledge, particularly the Syilx language and culture, while also pursuing a Bachelor of Education degree. Cody teaches the Syilx language, Inuk Kai Lukchin, at the Nicola Valley Institute of Technology and participates in language revitalization efforts. Cody plans to become a high school teacher and aims to inspire and empower Indigenous youth to embrace their heritage and pursue higher education. You can learn more and read more inspiring stories about the TELUS Student Bursary Program at telus.com/bursary.
Okay, Mike and Geoff, I'm excited for this next part of the party where we're going to do a little bit of a Christmas carol. We're going to have invited into the hotel, which is obviously haunted, three ghosts of episodes past. We're going to bring back some of our guests who've been with us before to talk about BC politics in the past, the present, and the future. So the first person to join us today, of course, is one of our most frequent guests now. I'm sure actually he might hold the title, James Moore. Welcome back to Hotel Pacifico, James.
Pleasure to be at the hotel. Nice to see you all.
Yeah, there he is.
Happy
Welcome,
holidays.
Happy holidays to all of you.
Honourable.
We were definitely thinking you'd bring a Christmas sweater for this one. Do you have one?
I don't. I have a Canucks jersey, and no, powder blue Oxford shirts is kind of my go-to.
It's
I
the
have
uniform of
powder blue
conservatives,
Oxford
isn't it?
shirt, and then I have powder blue Oxford shirt. I also have powder blue Oxford shirt, but yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of my groove too.
Okay. That ruins my theory then. Okay, great. Great. Well, Mike, you're alone, but we do appreciate your beautiful sweater. Okay, so I want to we have to talk about yesterday, right? I don't know how we avoid it. Yesterday being Monday morning, the day when I'm going to assume the PMO in Ottawa was braced for what was going to be a tough day with a by-election at the end of the day, and then the fall economic statement and the update, being, we're more in deficit than we even anticipated before. But that wasn't even the worst of it, was it?
No, I mean, I always say like successful politicians, you have to have high EQ, high IQ, and high GQ. And, we know that Justin Trudeau has the GQ part. It was always sort of thought that he was low, perhaps on the IQ part, but I think that's always been overstated. He's smarter than people realize.
Yeah.
But on the EQ part, which is just sort of the interpersonal capacity to connect with people and understand other people's emotions and their motivations and stuff like that, we always thought that he was off the chart. The idea that you would bring in your trusted and most loyal cabinet minister who's been with you through COVID, through Trump 1.0, through blackface, through 3 election campaigns, has been a loyal soldier to you all the way through thick and thin, that you would draw her into your office on a Zoom call and say to her, you're going to deliver an economic update, and we're going to have the $250 rebate checks and a temporary GST holiday, neither of which you agree with, but we're going to do it. And you're going to table it. And then the day after you table it, we're going to shuffle you out. And then we're going to bring somebody in to sort of change the narrative on the finances of the country. And so you're going to go along with that, I assume, because you're loyal. And then somebody else is going to come in, probably Mark Carney, and be the new finance minister. And then we'll kind of fix the finances. And the idea that she would go along with that and not take absolute, insult to that and to not be aware of that shows a lack of EQ, a lack of HR, a lack of just basic human understanding of how other people operate that is phenomenally hard to grasp. But then on top of that, and further weaponizing that, is that the cascade effect that's going to have on the morale of your party, your caucus, your cabinet, and everybody else to say, if you're going to do that to her, you're going to do that to me. And then the third step of it is for the general to not understand that the general public would say, wait a minute, if his deputy prime minister and finance minister has lost total confidence in him as a person, as a fiscal manager, and as a manager of the Canada-US relationship, which is the tectonic issue of 2025, if she's lost faith with him on all of those things, why should I have any faith in him? So he lost Freeland, he's losing his caucus and cabinet solidarity and morale, and then he's losing the voters with it. I mean, it was a triple hit of failure on the HR side that I've never seen before.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know which thread to pick up on that.
I can't think of a federal precedent
for
at
that
least.
for that type.
Well, I can't think of a sitting prime minister who has undergone this. I can think of some BC parallels, but provincial politics. But I can't think of a federal.
What are you thinking of on the provincial side?
Well, at the end of Gordon Campbell's tenure, there was a caucus rebellion, and ultimately he left office, right? Suddenly.
But
and,
what's the in terms of the
Clark
precedent? I think
obviously faced huge pressures. So.
Yeah.
But what's the because I
And
think some of what's unprecedented about this though, there's a lot that's sort of a lot to unpack. It just even the conversation that happened on Friday, I think, is interesting. But then her reaction, and I've had some interesting conversations with different folks about this, about her letter and how they feel about it. Because I've heard some people say you just never do it that way. There's no way to do it that way. And I'd say a larger number of people saying broadly, good on her. but to write a letter so publicly that really and share it publicly, and I think the notice that the PMO had was not much. To send a letter like that out is there something like, I guess, what's the precedent for that? Can we think of anything like that?
Well, I know there's precedent, but I think the two most negative arrows that you could fire at her narrative on everything that happened. One would be, so wait a minute, you disagreed with his handling of the Canada-U.S. relationship since he was reelected as president of the United States. You've disagreed with his fiscal approach so far. You've disagreed with his managerial style. You've disagreed. Your whole caucus and your parliamentary secretary were bragging about the GST cut and bragging about the $250 check 3 days ago in Parliament, and you obviously approved those talking points because you're a pretty command and control finance minister. You were okay with all of that. But when you were told you were going to be shuffled into this Canada-U.S. job and taken now out comes the self-righteousness. If you were staying in finance, you were maybe okay with this, is one of the safe things to say about it. And the second thing is, you had this epiphany on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the documents go to print, you've approved it. We're still a G7 country, and you put your hand on the Bible and you swore an oath to be the finance minister of the country of Canada and to the government of Canada, and we're going into perilous circumstances, and you're gonna throw this grenade at the prime minister. Like you do have some fiduciary obligations as the finance minister not to do this in quite a pit of peak of rage. And those are the two most negative things you can say. I don't know if they hold water over time, but
James, to go back to your first point and the enigma of the prime minister, and I accept everything you've said, but I saw him, as did 3,000 others, deliver a eulogy to John Horgan on Sunday afternoon. In retrospect, I'm even more astonished than I was on Sunday. Not astonished, but very gratified at the sincere and I thought heartfelt statement that he made. Was devoid of some of his usual flourishes, and I thought right from the heart. Looking back on that and seeing that these events that you've described occurred on Friday, he apparently had no inkling of them until Monday morning, describes a government where two key personalities don't even seem to have connections at the staff level to say, hey, you're going to get buried alive on Monday morning. And I think you're right to point at this very strange and complete ability of the prime minister to sequester a political crisis and still make the long trip out to British Columbia to Victoria, travel all the way back. Very strange and devastating outcome.
And their staffs used to be very closely integrated. Freeland's office and the PMO were historically quite tight. And and I think
famously the PMO appointed their chiefs of staff, right? So they were like
that. But Andrew Bevan went. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in November of 2015, when he was sworn in as prime minister, it was Justin Trudeau plus 34 in the famous 50-50 gender balanced cabinet. Of those 34 cabinet ministers that he was sworn in alongside with, there are 9 left. And you look at the army of all, he's gone through 3 governors general, he's gone through 3 now, his 4th or 3.5 U.S. presidents, multiple premiers and all that. Like, he is deep on the back 9 of his time as prime minister anyway. But if you look at all those former cabinet ministers who are there, and you go through the index of them, Bill Morneau, Jody Wilson-Raybould, Jane Philpott, Bill Morneau, Mark Garneau, and like you start at now Chrystia Freeland. You do a scan around social media, do a scan around informed commentary, podcasts, and out there, and people who are talking. You don't see a lot of them putting their hand up and saying, Justin Trudeau's a great manager. Maybe he did this wrong, but overall, he's got a great track record. I can tell you that Brian Mulroney, Stephen Harper, Jean Chrétien, even Paul Martin in the brief time that he was prime minister, if somebody wants to have a conversation about Stephen Harper's time as prime minister, I will put my hand up and defend the things that our government did and explain the things that were unsuccessful and all that. Justin Trudeau's got a pretty small gallery of people out there who are former cabinet ministers saying that he's been a good manager, a good leader, a focused leader who got things done. That is not a large audience of people. The people who are left saying that are mostly backbenchers hoping he can get a little taste of cabinet before the lights go out.
Can I pick up on something you said, James, about I think a fair criticism, I'm going to call it both a fair and an unfair criticism of Chrystia Freeland, and the point that, some of her view of Justin Trudeau clearly changed on Friday. right? There was a sort of endorsement of him up until that point where she was told she's no longer Minister of Finance. And I just want to say it had echoes for me of Jody Wilson-Raybould and how we were talking about her initially when that all unfolded with SNC-Lavalin. Like, I think initially there was a lot of like, oh, okay, you're bothered because you're demoted. And with time, more detail comes out. And I think, so I'm going to call it both fair and unfair, because I think sometimes we need a bit of time to understand a bit of the portrait of what was going on for Chrystia Freeland and when she made this decision. The other thing I want to pick up on it is it's interesting because clearly there was something Justin Trudeau had to do here. And I'm going to point to the evidence of Donald Trump's tweet, like completely. I mean, I guess it's going to be classic for him, so I won't kind of reflect on the tenor of it. But, Governor Trudeau clearly has had to oust her, and good riddance, which is not surprising. But I think it points to the fact that there was a tough decision there about, the Trump administration was never going to be particularly welcoming of Chrystia Freeland in these discussions. And some changes were going to need to be made to navigate this ongoing tariff battle with the U.S.
But he knew that. And so why did he offer her the Canada-US job?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
with no power and no money and no.
Yeah, and Justin Trudeau now is one of the longer serving leaders of the G7 of the G20 leaders. And again, you know the room, know your audience. He knew his audience well enough to bring Dominic LeBlanc down to Mar-a-Lago and not Chrystia Freeland. And then over the weekend, he offers her the Canada-US gig. When you know that Bob Lighthizer, who was her counterpart negotiator as USTR, his protege is going to be the lead negotiator on behalf of the US, and he has no good feelings about Chrystia Freeland as a person. So anyhow, all of it spells not good. I certainly also think, by the way, that, when you have it's been a year now, but you have a sequence of polls showing the Liberals 15, 20, now up to 25 points behind in the polls. I think you find your spirit of independence and self-righteousness pretty easily when you get snubbed personally by the Prime Minister, is that all of a sudden you can see an opportunity to step out and get away. And you see, we can pivot to BC politics, I guess, but you see Christy Clark getting a little bit more, forward-leaning in terms of her campaigning in the Cloverdale-Langley by-election, going out there and being in Ottawa and, scoping out for leader, and other people doing things. Yeah, you get 20, 25 points up in the polls of a prime minister who hasn't shuffled his cabinet, who has no fundraising capacity, who's, sneaking around the country, coming in the back doors of, Diwali events and local fundraisers and trying to, you can find your spirit of strength and self-righteousness in an environment where the prime minister is clearly broken and falling apart.
I mean, they still continue to do a lot of small ball stuff. Like Justin Trudeau was out in Poco last week pouring beer at I think Greg Moore's craft beer place, if it's the same place I'm thinking of. I'm thinking like with everything, Rome is burning, and you're still doing these types of events right now, right? Like it's just
like, isn't that where they feel he shines? Yeah.
Well,
yeah, but he is in a tough spot. I mean, in some ways, he is the Prime Minister of Canada. He's also the leader of the Liberal Party. As Prime Minister of Canada, you have to be stoic and brave and have a clear jaw and unflinching, because you're the leader of a country, and you could have a crisis, and you've got Donald Trump, and you have an economy, and you have you have to be absolutely firm and look like you're made of steel. Sometimes in leadership, I mean, all of us know in our different aspects in politics and in leadership, is like, I always say, like, governing is sort of like a fashion show on the runway. Strong stride, clear-eyed, perfect posture, everything looks good. You peek behind the curtains, chaos. Clothes are flying around, stage managers are losing their mind.
So
Who's
much
next?
better
What's
than
next?
the duck metaphor. I love it.
The music isn't in sync. Oh my God. But as soon as you pass the curtains and you're in line of sight of the crowd, you're walking smooth, you're walking tall, everything is clear and perfect. Behind the curtains, it could be a nightmare. Sometimes it's not a nightmare, often it's a nightmare. And it's a nightmare right now.
Well, we'll see where it goes. So James, just pivoting to BC politics. It was a crazy year, as it usually are. They always are. But looking back on 2024, what do you think is the biggest legacy coming out of 2024? What is the event that, or the happening that took place, that's going to have the biggest impact over the coming years ahead?
I mean, obviously exposing a bit of my bias here, but I think clarity about what the free enterprise option is likely to be going forward. Certainly, a lot of BC United supporters and organizers, etc., are maybe not happy with John Rustad, not comfortable with certain elements of the BC Conservative Party, but the speed at which the BC United collapsed, and the speed at which the broad free enterprise universe rallied around a single brand and a single leader as an alternative to the NDP, and how close they came to almost winning the election in spite of real holes in their game, real holes in their platform, and all the imperfections. It showed that the province is ready for a change, but that you have to be um, when you have a change in government in Canada at all times, it's not good enough for the public to want the incumbent government out. They have to really want the alternative in, especially in the provincial side, because it's a binary choice, which means it's almost always a majority government. So the public has to not just want the government out, but really want the opposition in. And that's the task for the Conservatives in the next, couple, 2, 3, 4 years, is to professionalize themselves, organize themselves, understand the posture and the presence, and that at all times you are campaigning in the sense that you're trying to make an impression with the public about what you would be like in government. And it's not just about throwing knives and grenades at the government and trying to tear apart their agenda and bring people down and force shuffles and resignations and embarrassments and all that, and winning media moments. But it's actually just the habitual daily impression of substance, professionalism, capacity, and character, and a sense of that you are culturally aligned with the contemporary instincts of the province. And that happens over months of impressions, not through a cute, quick campaign where you just try to convince people of stuff. But it's a reputation that's built over time, and so they should play the long game. So anyway, my long way of saying 24, the alignment and the clarity of a binary choice likely in the next campaign, and a clear mission for the Conservatives in the next certainly 12 to 24 months to get it together and provide the public with an alternative.
Well, James, last summer when you were on, you put a pin in my remarks because I went through a list of reasons why I thought the NDP should be confident, and you said, "Oh, that's fine," but all of the key public indicators are seeing the province in the wrong track, and so at some point a government will fall through that crust. David Eby made it. He's still got pretty good personal approval ratings. What was your take on the NDP campaign when the final 22 votes were counted?
Net well. It's often when a government comes close to losing, you think if the election was 2 weeks longer, they probably would have lost. But I actually think if the election was 2 weeks longer, they probably would have had a slightly wider margin, because I think the frailties and the imperfections of the Conservatives were really coming to the surface. It wasn't just some comments by some candidates. The analog that when I talk to people in the Conservative universe now is that Stephen Harper lost in 2004 before we won in 2006. And the loss in 2004 forced the Conservative Party to professionalize, modernize. He went out and he drew in Jim Flaherty, John Baird, and Tony Clement from the provincial government in Ontario, brought in Lawrence Cannon, a former minister in the province of Quebec, leveled up our game in a way that made us a much stronger, more capable, not just of winning the election, but governing, which is the real thing. People can win elections, but to succeed at governing is really what matters ultimately. And because you're focused on succeeding in governing, the back end politics comes along with it. So you kind of have to focus on that in order to get the other, if you take my point. And so so I think the BC Conservative Party, if they take some lessons from that experience, I think they will be well served by that. But the NDP, I mean, David Eby, it's funny. He's very different than John Horgan, but he carries there's a certain temperament about BC New Democrats that's seems to be foreign to the federal New Democrats, right? Which is just a laid back, likable, unthreatening manner about them. And that was generally true of Glenn Clark. That was generally true. That was certainly true of John Horgan, and I think is generally true of David Eby. That you may not alike and you may prefer instinctively not to vote New Democrat, but I don't like him, but I don't hate him. And there's a certain element of our politics that, as I said, you really have to want the government out and you have to want the alternative in. And he gets a big buffer as a consequence of his easygoing presentation.
Gas or electric? How about all of the above? Lately, I've been talking about how much we rely upon our province's gas and electric systems working together. We need both systems working together to safely, reliably, and affordably meet the needs of British Columbians. And if you're a FortisBC customer that qualifies, you can have all of the above, gas and electric. FortisBC has introduced a new rebate of $10,000 or more for eligible customers who replace their home's older gas heating systems with an electric heat pump and high-efficiency furnace. Speaking for myself, I like myself a good heat pump, especially when paired with a high-efficiency furnace. How's it work? A dual fuel system provides whole home heating and cooling and is a good option for homeowners who are replacing an aging gas furnace and want to upgrade to a reliable and efficient system, keeping their home comfortable year-round. It includes an electric heat pump for cooling during warm weather and space heating during milder conditions, and a high-efficiency gas furnace for heating in colder weather. So just like our provincial energy systems, you get the advantages of both gas and electric at the household level to ensure your home energy remains affordable, efficient, and reliable. Kind of like a hybrid car, gas and electric. Sidebar, my first car was a 72 Volkswagen Bug that ran on leaded gas. That sucker was no hybrid. Anyways, the new rebate is part of FortisBC's commitment to offer the next generation of rebates for high-efficiency technologies and systems to help achieve provincial climate action goals by harnessing the strengths of both energy systems. Find a full list of rebates and energy efficiency information at fortisbc.com/rebates. FortisBC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast.
Welcome. This is our next guest to the Hotel Pacifico holiday party, or if you want to use a different metaphor, the second ghost in the Hotel Pacifico Christmas Carol. Joy MacPhail, thank you for joining us.
Nice to see everybody. Very nice to see everybody.
James Moore here got the party started, and the party continues with you here. And you're reputed to be the life of the party whenever you go to parties.
Mm-hmm. She's nodding. She's nodding for those of you. There's a knowing nod happening right now. Well, so Joy, we wanted to take a minute and take this time. And actually, James, I want to maybe ask both of you and go back. Because I think, James, we didn't get to go back with you. And Joy, it'd be good to go back. Let's look at 2024 and think about, if you could pick one moment in 2024 in BC politics that mattered the most, which moment would you pick?
Ladies first.
Well, that's easy for me. October 19th, 2024, when my party, NDP, suffered, as I quote the Premier, David Eby, a near-death experience. I think that while the challenge was expected to the NDP, I don't think anyone expected it to be that big a devastating outcome to the NDP. What is it, 44 almost brand new Conservatives elected?
MLAs and 47, yep.
Right.
47 NDP.
And and it's changed the face of politics going forward now. I think the legislature will be functioning very differently. I think relationships with various stakeholders and interest holders will change. Relationships with the Indigenous First Nations communities will change because of that near-death experience. And I guess one could also say, good.
Well, pick up on that. Tell me good. Like what, particularly if we can talk about the campaign, what in particular do you think, what cues do you think David Eby and his team should be looking at to see they need to do better on?
And I want to make it clear on this great Christmas party here, I'm a New Democrat through and through and support the government through and through.
What?
Shocking. I know, shocking. I bleed orange, as my son says. However,
well, friends tell friends when they have spinach in their teeth. So go on.
Yes, good. I do think that a lot of lessons were learned. I'm hopeful. And I would say the biggest lesson we learned as New Democrats occurred right in Surrey. We held, how many seats, Geoff, did we have? Did we have 10 there?
I think we went 7 to 3. Is that right, Mike? Or something like that? Or more than that?
It might have been 8-2.
Yeah.
Or it was 7-2 before the election. Now there's 10 seats.
Right. And then there was an extra seat, right, through redistribution. So what I think the lesson that was learned from Surrey, where, in my view, the election was decided, that the government of the previous 7 years promised and didn't deliver on so many on many things for people in Surrey, particularly around hospitals and schools. Those things are very hard to do. especially during a pandemic, etc. But then lower the bar a little bit. Don't lead people on, because voters want transparency and they want sincerity, and they want governments to listen to what their concerns are, not to be told what their concerns are. And their concern was a hospital. And our government didn't deliver that.
So
Joy,
I want to, go ahead.
Well, so you went through a big win in your first election, 1991, and then in 96, arguably was a near-death experience for the NDP then. Do you draw any parallels between what you saw, like psychologically, like?
And then 2001 was a death experience.
Well, yeah.
Did die.
Well, you were the remaining heartbeat.
I survived. Yeah. I arose from the rubble. Yeah, I look back at 1996 and when then Premier Glenn Clark came onto the stage of our victory celebration after hours and hours of us waiting to find out who actually had won the election. And he said, whoa, that was close. And it was true, and we all laughed nervously. And then we realized over the course of the next couple of years just what close means for governing. Caucus members, and it's these are all not negatives in my view, but caucus members have a greater say in what's important to their community, because it's not a veto that caucus members have, but it's a bigger say in what they have and what's important to their communities. So politics, what became important to the community, and for instance, Prince George, with Lois Boone representing Prince George, became far more important than perhaps it had in a previous government where the majority was much bigger. And I think that's a good thing. The difficult thing in where there's such a close small majority is that things can get out of hand on procedural matters that really don't mean that much to the ordinary public. Matters inside, what do we call that? The stone house, inside the legislature buildings, can take on a life of their own that really don't matter in terms of what is for the good of British Columbians. And yet they're so significant because the government could fall on a procedural misstep.
I mean, this is something I think we can get to. Joy, I'd like to pick this up too, thinking about what's ahead for 2025. But tonight, James Moore is the guy who comes to the party, grabs a glass of eggnog, does a round, and then goes out the back door because we've only got him for a couple minutes. So, James, one last question for you. I mean, I wanted to go to that question, that backward question of 2024. Would you agree with Joy that election night was the most important night last year? Or sorry, this year, we're still in it. So 2024.
No. I will say that the most important day going forward to 2025 to carry forward from 2024 was November 12th. That was the day John Horgan passed away, because there are rare moments that happen. And as it happens, it was just a few weeks after the provincial elections. You have all these new MLAs on the opposition side, some on the government side, and they're all now coming into office and hiring staff and getting constituency offices and thinking about what their contributions are going to be to politics. And then as that happens, an outgoing premier is leaving this world, and everybody has a moment of reflection. And we often talk in society about resume virtues that get you a job and have you have success in life, and then eulogy virtues, which are really the things that matter. And then in the combination of those two things, you have the things that were drawn to the surface that were universally admired about John Horgan that I hope everybody coming into office listened to. You didn't have to agree, you didn't have to disagree, it doesn't really matter. But in the fullness of time, when you have the opportunity to look at your political career in the rearview mirror, certain things come to the surface. And the things that came to the surface about John Horgan's time in public life are things that people should scrape off and carry with them as they go into the next legislature and use those things to be successful in public life. Whether you're conservative, green, New Democrat, doesn't matter. And it's about, as Joy pointed out, focusing on the public's concerns, not your aspirations, the public's anxieties, not your pet projects. carrying yourself, taking your job seriously, but not yourself seriously, understanding the privilege of the opportunity to serve, and carrying with you a sense of responsibility about the burden of other people's anxieties and your opportunity to serve them. And John Horgan did that, and he did it remarkably well. So I think the election gave the opportunity for people to refresh the legislature in its own way. The passing of John Horgan, I think those resume virtues and eulogy virtues should give people a little bit of sense of focus about what people admire in political leadership and draw from that as they go into 2025 and the next legislature and find their own version of success with those sort of best learnings from the life of John Horgan.
Wow.
Well
Even
said.
when you leave early. Yeah. You really bring it for the party.
He drops the mic on his way out the door.
Drops the mic, James Moore.
That's my.
I
Right.
found it, well, anyway.
Well, we'll say goodbye to James, and then Joy will
Yeah.
pick it up with you. Thank you, James, for joining us. Thanks
Great
for
to see
dropping
you all.
in.
Nice to see you,
Good
Joy.
to see you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi, James.
Joy, you wanted to pick up on that, and then we can maybe, well, our next guest will be here shortly. So
Well, my first reaction, and James and I are friends and colleagues, and my first reaction was, "Are you kidding me? Like, that's kind of creepy, if you ask me, to say that the most important thing was when a person dies." And I get that he was saying that we should all reflect on the great service that John Horgan did, and it's true. We did all reflect about that at John's memorial on the weekend. But to say that a passing of a premier is the most important event is just, it's creepy to me, I have to tell you. Sorry,
Interesting. Yeah.
James.
Well,
No.
we are dealing with ghosts here today.
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
a haunted hotel. It is a haunted hotel.
I'm Hamas, and this is Simon, and we live in Surrey. We started hosting on Airbnb because we thought we had the spare room, and why not share it with people? When our guests come in, first thing usually they ask is, "I'm really hungry, it's been a really long flight, can you recommend a place?" Usually Simon is really good with that. He knows all the good spaces. Because we got a lot of good reviews and people commented on the overall look of the space, I was like, okay, maybe I can do this for a living. It actually gave me the courage to start school in interior design. It made such an impact on us financially, and I don't know, I think we're happier because we started Airbnb for sure.
Learn more at airbnb.com/host.
Okay, Mike, our next guest, he's here. Richard Zussman, thank you for joining us as
Our
our
little
third.
hotel elf.
I was just going to say it, Elf. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And just to say, I mean, this episode now, thanks to Richard Zussman, needs to be viewed on YouTube because the sweater Richard is wearing has lapped Mike McDonald and left him in the dust.
There we go. There we
Yeah,
go.
good.
Oh my goodness.
Now we
You know,
match.
last time I was here, I brought gifts, and now I've got all sorts of gifts hidden behind these doors, right?
Okay.
We've got stars and presents,
Okay.
gingerbread houses, and
Incredible.
obviously on
Santa
Christmas, Santa pays a visit.
himself.
So, you know,
This
he's
is
the
not
one
a
with the
good-
real gifts.
If this is
Wait,
not
how
a clip
did you-
on nocontext.gov, if this doesn't make it this week, then that is
I don't know what
that
happened.
website's dead
Oh,
to
with the
us.
postal strike over, you gnomes should get back to work building toys, I think. I mean, there's a backlog going on.
So one of my favorite journalistic moments was I had another Christmas sweater that had a menorah on it that says "Get Lit," and I was with former Premier John Horgan right after he told voters to be lit to vote for PR, and we made gingerbread houses, and that's an endearing Christmas memory that will last with me forever. So I could have worn my "Get Lit" menorah sweatshirt, but I thought with this one had more fun
Richard,
stuff associated
stop.
with
Hey.
it. Joy, where's
No.
your sweater?
No,
I
yeah.
can't compete. I cannot compete.
No,
Joy
no.
and I are in our holiday stripes, and that's as far as we're going to go today. Next year, we'll revisit this. But
Okay, politics.
Rich, yeah, well, Richard took us there interestingly because I think we were having a very divisive reaction to James Moore's comment. Richard, to update you, we were picking on, what were the events of 2024 that mattered the most, and James, said November 12th. And the passing of John Horgan, and had a reflection, about what goes in your resume versus what goes in your eulogy, I think was the point he was trying to make. And I think Joy picked it up. Joy, tell me if I'm paraphrasing, but Joy was a bit horrified to say, to pick the passing of someone is a bit morbid. I want to pick up though, because I know you were at the funeral, or the memorial, sorry, over the weekend. And just, if we can take a more somber note for a minute, I'd love to hear your reflections, from that event, and on John Horgan himself.
Yeah, so the deepest thing for me was listening to his boys, Nate and Evan, and the incredible toll that public life takes on family. One of the comments one of his sons made was about he had so many stories to share, but those were going to be stories that he kept private to talk about amongst friends and family rather than shared with British Columbians. And it sort of made me think, and Joy's lived through this too, is we underappreciate often in observing politicians the tremendous personal toll public life has. And there seemed to be at times from his kids a resentment towards that. And they acknowledged that their dad, John, had always prioritized them, had been to their concerts and their sporting events, but no doubt events were missed, moments were missed. And that incredibly deep toll on a family was something that, I reflected on deeply listening to that. And, obviously the impact that John Horgan has had politically has been so deep, but it was that personal touch. And, you think about that for every British Columbian that feels that personal touch of John Horgan, that interaction they had with him, it's almost like that was a moment taken away from his kids and his wife Ellie, and I was left with that listening to them speak on the stage.
Yeah, well, Richard, that's literally the case, and I agree with you. To set the stage a bit for people, I don't know how much TV coverage there were, but there were over 3,000 people there. So British Columbians turned out en masse. We tend to focus on the VIPs, and they were certainly there. There was a big delegation of Conservatives of all types, BC Conservatives led by John Rustad, but also at least two former premiers. The Prime Minister came, the Lieutenant Governor spoke. It had everything of a provincial state funeral, which it was, but everything about the community and the people of BC. Many Indigenous leaders, very moving contributions from the First Nations leaders in his constituency. But Evan, his son, said, we had 35 years with him, and I wanted 35 more. The post-political period. And it's literally lost to the grandchildren because Nate and his wife were expecting a grandchild who will never meet her granddad. And I think for those who are aware of that backdrop was particularly poignant and understandable that he would have that, such a deep feeling of grief. So it was a remarkable service at every level. And, I think you put your finger on the key point. I was certainly a wreck after those two speeches.
Joy, I'm wondering from your perspective, because of all of us on this call, you're the one who did the time in public service and has that experience of sort of that tension between the call of the job and showing up for your family. It's particularly reflecting on John Horgan and how he balanced that. Is that something that resonates for you?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think people remind me of incidents now that I have blocked out about raising my kid from a toddler to a late teen. Now, I had a very supportive circle of family and friends, including Jack's dad, my son's dad, who was very, very instrumental in being almost the primary parent. I think you always, in raising families in politics, you have to have a real solid support team other than yourself, because just the logistics of having to travel to a different city, having two homes, managing a child having to be in two different places are all hard on you. I think this whole question will be very interesting in the new legislature, where I'm crying a little bit because I did watch John's memorial online. I couldn't be there, and the parts you call out are absolutely right, Geoff and Richard. But it'll be interesting with the legislature where they're predominantly women now. Is it like 59% are women?
Yep. Highest ever.
and younger as well. So I'm not saying that in 2025 it's women only that are responsible for raising our children, but you know what? It's usually women only who are responsible for raising our children. But the youth and the predominance of women, it will be a real test for a new legislature to meet that challenge of parenting. I bet you there'll be times when there'll be a bunch of new kids being born during this upcoming term. And how will we handle it? And what will we do to make our politicians comfortable and not feel badly about having to raise a child while being an MLA as well? I look forward
Do you think we'll finally get a childcare at the legislature?
Well,
Well, it's long been rumored that they're going to put it right here in the Global BC offices. So we're going to find out.
That would be
Keith
terrible.
Well,
Baldry
that's
is a
extra
great
space for
child
sure.
care
That's
provider.
available.
The most
I was gonna say,
unsafe
that'd be
building
a
on the
step
precinct.
up.
Exactly.
Most
Not
unsafe building in the
toddler-proofed.
province.
But anyway, yes, it is difficult, although I will say that I meet young parents, men and women, who are facing that same difficulty in lots of other professions as well. It may be the public glare that creates a greater challenge, being in the lineup at Safeway and someone with your kid, and someone wants to talk to you about the war in the woods and how you're really screwing that up. And all he wants is to get his cereal in time to get home and eat it. But anyway, the best in this changed nature of the legislature.
So, Richard, what about a bold prediction for 2025 from you?
Yeah, so I think one of the things for British Columbians that will be most interesting to watch is the fate of a friend of the pods, Christy Clark. Like, I think this is slowly emerging now as one of the potential storylines of 2025 if Prime Minister Justin Trudeau decides to resign and we are thrust into a leadership with the prize being the job as Prime Minister. It's going to be fascinating to me to see what role Christy Clark plays in that. Does she have a real shot here to win a federal leadership? We've seen her strike once with lightning in this province to become premier. Can she do it at the national level? And then the other ones, Keith Baldry and I declared John Rustad our Newsmaker of the Year in 2024. He may be the Global BC Newsmaker in 2025 for a very different reason. He may lose total control of this caucus. There are already cracks that are showing. There's an opportunity here, with the implosion of BC United and with Kevin Falcon still lingering somewhere as the leader of a party that is in substantial debt and is struggling to survive. There's opportunity here for the Conservatives to become that replacement for government. They almost did it in 2024, but there's also reality that Rustad doesn't even make it through the year, that his own caucus creates so many problems that the membership, whatever it may be with the Conservatives, because that's unclear to us. We haven't seen big conventions from them. We haven't seen big events from them. So those are the two things I'm really watching, is what happens on the federal front and a BC side with Christy Clark, and then what happens with the Conservatives here, and whether, John Rustad, who made huge gains in 2024, may see the implosion in 2025.
Can I refine this question a bit, Richard? Because as you're talking, I'm reflecting on how sometimes, like, when we pick a moment out of 2024 that we're going to look back in hindsight and say really matters, sometimes there are those moments, I'm thinking in particular, that feel smaller in the moment, and then only the hindsight of time makes them really seem to be, their kind of magnitude shows up. And I'm wondering, because you're picking up, sometime within the Conservative caucus, I feel like in the Conservative dynamics, there might be some of that, but I'll leave it open-ended. Like, is there something that feels like it could be that to you, something that felt small that maybe in hindsight we'll say, that was a symptom of stuff yet to come?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There are a few things that sort of stand out at the top of my mind. Selena Robinson being resigning and then leaving caucus. We're still feeling some of the aftershocks of that, and more as a test of David Eby's leadership. And yes, he passed it during an election, barely. The election was not a time for David Eby to celebrate and say, look, I did an incredible job as a leader and British Columbians trust me. He was tested there right to the brink. So that moment was one. Clearly, some of the issues. This letter that was written by 13 Conservative MLAs telling Eleanor Sturko to apologize will have long-lasting ripple effects. And then clearly just that decision by Kevin Falcon to uproot everything and quit, not a small event, a big one that happened sort of in the cloak of darkness in this boardroom at a law firm in Vancouver, continues to have repercussions around how the center-right coalesces itself in British Columbia, and whether this conservative brand, whatever it may be here in BC, is too extreme for some, and will there be a centrist alternative that emerges? So, those things largely are more about leadership than they are about political decision making. And leadership, ultimately, you guys spend a lot of time talking about this on the podcast. Like, that is the true test of success, is how you can lead. And all of those events reflect different levels of testing those that matter the most in this province's leadership.
Richard, I have to step in to say that the event you point to was not Falcon quitting. It was him not quitting, remaining the leader, vetting out everybody, making it impossible for a new group to run as BC United, which might have had a very different impact on the election. He remained in place as part of a very carefully considered strategy hatched by who knows who. And those people will be watching John Rustad. And if his performance is subpar, I assume they'll have something to say about it, because he owes to them a fair amount of his existence, in my view.
And I've struggled.
I think one of the biggest wild cards of 2025 is, will the BC Liberals make a comeback?
Yeah, and how?
And
What?
here's the thing, is they have a debt.
Well said, Joy.
Mike has
Joy,
That was not on my bingo card.
But it's always on
Mike.
Mike's.
Hear me
It's
out,
always
hear me
on
out.
Mike's.
Hear me out.
Oh,
The lesson we can learn from the Conservatives is, if you have a brand that's got some brand power, you can get back in the conversation, right? So now, I'm not saying the BC Liberals are going to march back to power anytime soon, but first of all, get rid of the BC United brand. That's obviously failed.
what mistake that was.
But the minute you put BC Liberals back on a polling question, you're probably in double digits, like at least 10% or something, and you are a factor, and you may be taking it more off the NDP, you may be taking it more off the Conservatives, but you're in the conversation, and I think that wasn't there in October. It was absolutely not on the ballot.
Do you think you're even in double digits with the shitstorm happening in Ottawa right now?
Well, I think post-Justin in particular,
Post-Justin,
the
fair
liberal
point.
brand will.
Yeah.
And I would say it's just that we've gone through this before, right? In history, like it's just
Not
it's
much.
just
Not
something
much.
something lies in the weeds, and then all of a sudden,
Social,
could be 20 years,
social
could be 20
credit's
years from
available
now.
too.
I want to. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No,
When
it's
we
not
finish-
allowed yet.
When we finish this, I want to give you my bold prediction for 2025.
Oh, please do.
Do
Please
it. Do it.
And it's a little bit not so much inside the Beltway. I think there's going to be a reset between the business community and the Premier of this province and the NDP, and I think it will be the top goal of the government under David Eby in 2025. And we all know it needs a reset, and first and foremost, the Premier knows that. And I think that that will be much of the focus of at the early part of 2025, and certainly well into the legislative session as well.
He expressed that intention at the BC Chamber lunch last week, but I just wonder whether the Green Deal is going to get in the way of that.
And I also wonder whether he's up for I wonder if he's up for the test. I was with him at a Greater Vancouver Board of Trade event during the campaign, and he looked so uncomfortable. And he had Brenda Bailey with him, now as finance minister, who was dragging him along to meet people in the business community. And you could get that sense, Mike, Geoff, you guys have been with premiers in rooms where it's uncomfortable. You could just get that sense he was not engaged. And he'll lean on people like you, Joy. I know that have connections in the business community in Vancouver. There will be others he has to lean on. But I wonder if he is ready to make that leap, to have that engagement, to lean on those who want to help. Because so far he has proven to be so uncomfortable in that space. And I also want to make, just to close the point that you were making, Mike, on the return of the BC Liberals. Like, I've been thinking a lot about how that center-right coalesces. Who is the leader that does that? And my new working theory, and I know he's disappeared on us, but I know James Moore is very happy in private life, and he's been in private life for a while. But I have watched James Moore over the years, and you just listen to him, right? He has matured so much in the way that he can communicate a message around how BC can stand out, how this country can stand out. There is something about him that could make a very strong leader of whatever that center-right coalition is. I know he hasn't been interested for a long time in this, and the family toll has been heavy for him. We talked about family, but that could be a guy who would immediately turn that into a relevant vessel.
I think the question, though, Joy is right about the Premier's intention to have that reset. But Richard raises the other side of it in some respects. Is the business community ready to have that reset? And my concern is that they're not. No matter, that people don't really care if David Eby's awkward, if they think he's business friendly. But the ship sailed, especially during the election, I think, for a lot of business leaders on this NDP. And it's going to be very difficult and challenging to get that back. And it's also counterintuitive for a lot of NDP voters who are looking for continued protection of a lot of the important social investments that were made and other progressive changes that were made. So I certainly agree with Joy's view that that's something that the Premier's indicated he really wants to do, but wanting to do it and being able to do it, apart from his personal qualities, Richard, whether people will let him do it is a big question.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think just the business community, I don't think have an alternative right now. John Rustad and his band of, okay, it's not the
Kevin Falcon called it clown car. Clown car came to mind.
Yeah. They're not the alternative right now for the business community. The issues are too serious with tariffs and us being
interesting.
Economy. The business community, I think, will see their way to having to sit down with the government and be very serious about the threat that we're facing from the United States, particularly in Colombia.
I mean, this had to be a really important part of the thinking, though, in the deal with the Greens, because they did sort of cut their ability, what am I going to say, clip their wings a bit in that deal with the Greens, I think, to be able to really cozy up to the business community. On the flip side, they're going to spend a lot less energy on just managing the business of government for 4 years, right? Like that part got easier. So there was some bandwidth back. It was a double-edged sword.
I disagree, Kate.
Okay.
You want to talk about the Green Deal for a sec?
Yes, do it.
I mean, I think it's interesting it came on a Friday. There's some, I could talk about it forever because I lived through the CASA agreement. Richard will remember this. The government has a majority. They were invited to form a government without any CASA deal or anything like it. So this deal is like a belt and suspenders, as lawyers say. You got your pants up with the belt, but you put on the suspenders just in case. So it gives a bit more protection. And the policy commitments were not that big a deal. But the operational and administrative aspect of it, which listeners would have their eyes glaze over if they tried to follow it, are onerous. Quarterly reports on progress, annual review of whether or not we still have confidence. So in a normal confidence and supply agreement, it builds up to a head and somebody pulls the alarm. But in this, there's a discussion every quarter about whether or not to pull the alarm, and then an annual review of whether or not to pull the alarm.
Interesting.
And any minister can be required on 24 hours notice to provide a briefing.
Well, you've got 47 MLAs. They've got 2.
Yeah.
And it always makes me, I mean, I know that in practice this is different, but what if there's 4 NDP MLAs who say, well, I want that power?
Impossible, Mike. Would never happen.
Well, the minute 3 or 4 NDP MLAs start acting up, like a Joe Manchin type of thing, then it's... well, then you got to rush and placate them, So
and we also spend some time talking about family, right? We've seen, Grace Laura is sick. She's going to be there for all the confidence votes. It's a younger caucus, as Joy described. So are people taking maternity leave? Are they taking paternity leave? Yes, there are very few confidence votes, but we have a situation here where it could disintegrate if we have people who are out. And the one part, and I agree with Geoff, what you said about the policy piece, to tie it in with the business community, the one thing that still stands out to me is that commitment around a forests review. And yes, the NDP doesn't have to go through with whatever comes out in that review, but that could be incredibly uncomfortable for the industry, where they are already hugely worried about the impact of tariffs and the fact there is no softwood lumber deal in place anymore. And all of that adds up to uncertainty. And as you guys all know, business community is not like uncertainty. That's the one line in there that really sort of stood out as potentially problematic, is what that review of forest does, even if the NDP walks away and doesn't implement it.
Well, actually, that's a very good point, Richard. And I would say that's an opportunity for the Premier to actually make that a real review that brings the business community to the table as an equal. There's no prediction of outcome on what that review could entail, and I think that's an area where the Premier could seize what he has to do anyway and make it work properly for the industry, and he can balance the needs of the Green Party as well. Absolutely. I just think there's I don't know whether that's what the intent of it was, to use that to reset with the industry, but it sure needs a reset, and that's a good start.
Well, on that note, I think this is a wrap for the Hotel Pacifico's first holiday party. Now, I'm going to say this holiday party is turning into a Christmas sweater themed event. Geoff, Joy, and I will convene to evaluate whether we agree with that and what our position is on that. But Richard and Mike, thank you for really bringing it today. You both look fantastic.
Well,
I was just
we do look fantastic.
Yeah, I was just here for the door prizes. Maybe I could win a free stay at the hotel sometime down the road.
Well, Kate, you taught me a new phrase, which is going to be very useful, a cilantro moment. I think that's a keeper.
Cilantro, yes. Divisive opinions that are either really well liked or dismissed are
No
cilantro.
sports analogies here, just food analogies. I love it.
like that.
We do well with the metaphors here. It is actually part of what we offer at Hotel Pacifico. So thank you, Richard and Joy, for joining us today.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, Merry
Happy
Christmas.
holidays.
Happy holidays.
Okay, Mike and Geoff, that was a wild party. That was a good time.
Incredible. I've
We're
never
sitting
seen
among-
an advent calendar
On a sweater.
sweater before. Now, I don't want anybody out there to think that we were leaning on any particular religious faith or anything like that, or channeling anything in particular. It was Richard Zussman's choice, but it was a fabulous one. So
was
for
a
those who don't
beautiful
know what
sweater.
advent calendars are, look it up. But
They're a lot of fun, and
Today they-
apparently can be turned into sweaters. You can knit
I
them.
think I had a beer advent calendar last year.
Oh, really?
They've really evolved in a
So-
good way.
they really have.
My sister and I have been making them for each other for years, and I did one last year for her where I used. Did you ever watch on SNL? There was those deep thoughts with Jack Handy. And I put in deep thoughts with Jack Handy every day of the 25 days leading up to
Good one.
Christmas. Yeah. My kids this year have Far Side calendar, like for Far Side cartoons. Yeah, it's fun.
Oh, that's vintage.
Yeah,
Um,
very vintage.
Jeff, I suspect you do not own an ugly sweater. That's
Well, I'll leave that for me to know and you to find out.
I'm thinking a Christmas presents ideas here.
Oh, he's getting inspired.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
getting
Well,
A nice
inspired.
bright orange one, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, orange would
absolutely.
work. Yeah, or like a
I've had lots. I've had
multi-fade,
lots.
like yeah.
I have
there's some good ones.
indestructible sweaters that my mother knit for me, so I can never
Do you
let them
really?
go, and I can, yeah. She made
That's
a big
fantastic.
25-year-old cable knit sweater. She did that kind of thing. They live forever.
That is
But they're
fantastic.
too hot to wear on a podcast. I wear them outside, maybe.
Especially when the
Yeah.
discussion's hot.
When the discussion's that hot and you have so many wonderful, colorful guests from the LG to James Moore and Joy MacPhail.
I think
and
we have to
Richard
comment
Zussman.
on the spectacular rise of James Moore during the course of this episode, because he went from being called creepy to being elected the next premier of the province by Richard Zussman. So
It's a fabulous in one pod, that trajectory
James'
is.
trajectory was quite strong.
Yes. Yeah. Well done, sir. Well done, sir. And then the comment that gave us what do I call it? Verbal cilantro. Strong reactions both ways. People loving it and hating it. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of. I'm going to call it, gentlemen. I think it was kind of the perfect wrap up for our first full year of Hotel Pacifico. It felt right. We had a lot of the greatest hits.
It's been a heck of a year. We've had a great guests, awesome guests throughout the year from all perspectives. So thanks to all of the guests who joined us. Obviously, thanks to the listeners. Thanks to both of you for enduring along with me and along with Snickers the daily election podcast in September and October, which was by evidenced by the ratings we were getting, was very well received by people out there.
Yeah, I get stopped all over the place.
People are sticking with us after the election, which is great.
It's wonderful. Yeah. No, thanks to both of you. I frankly just feel grateful every week that I get to sit down and have these conversations and think about these things. I look forward to disagreeing. I look forward to the humor. And I look forward to understanding more deeply and sometimes having a new take, a new view on something I thought I understood. It's a great exercise. And it's a great part of civic engagement that I'm grateful to be part of. So thanks to both of you.
Very much my own feelings, Kate. Thanks to both of you, because it's been very interesting. And I know people who stop me, and the Lieutenant Governor said some of that, but they really enjoy going deeper into the politics and hearing it in a way that is accessible as opposed to having to pick a side. I think that's part of it. So yeah, it's a great formula. And thanks, Mike, for dreaming it up. But I know there's a lot of people out there who want to keep going. So
okay,
we will be back.
2025.
We will be back. Probably. Well, I can't remember when we're recording. Early January. We'll pick it up in
second
early
week,
January.
I think. Yeah.
And so stay tuned. And by then we don't know the results of the fiscal update today when we're recording this. So
Sources tell me that province is running a deficit, Mike.
Yes. That seems,
we expect that to be a bit of red ink under the Christmas tree. Who knows if we have a new prime minister in January or what's going on there. There'll be lots to talk about. We're looking forward to it, and no shortage of topics in BC politics. We all know that.
Okay. And so we're going to round out the year with a quick trip to grab a drink.
Let's raise a glass or take a shot. Time to raid the minibar.
We're going to grab a drink today and raise our glass. I think we're going to do this all together. Is that right, gentlemen? We're unanimous again this week. Let's do that. This week, guests, we want to raise our glasses to you. We want to raise our glasses to you to say thank you for listening. Yeah, here, I'll grab a glass and actually physically raise this, especially because this includes our YouTube listeners, who I love. Yeah, we want to raise our glasses to you for being such an engaged and fantastic listenership. We love that you're listening, and we love hearing from you. We love hearing when you agree and disagree, and we love having you be part of this conversation. So thanks for joining us this year at the hotel and for being part of this conversation. All right, that's a wrap for 2024 at Hotel Pacifico. I want to thank our guests, LG Janet Austin, and I want to thank Joy MacPhail, James Moore, and Richard Zussman for joining us today. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Telus. I want to thank FortisBC and Airbnb. And we will see you next year, guests. BC, you can never leave.
Check out time at Hotel Pacifico. We hope you enjoyed your stay.